All right, everybody, welcome to Tesla Today. So, yesterday we had recent research released by Bloomberg showing that now 23 countries have reached the 5% mark of electric vehicles being sold. So, today I prepared a number of graphs and tables and charts. We're going to go through how many percentage of the penetration that EV adoption has taken now for each country. We're going to show you the potential growth. We're going to debate and discuss what we think is the potential decline of ICE and when is electric vehicles truly going to make the mark. And are we going to be able to hit the 80 million that's required by 2030? Are we going to be able to do sooner or after? So now I've got Randy Kirk with me. He is an author of 2 books about Elon Musk. He also has his own YouTube channel at Randy Kirk. Thank you so much, Randy. Appreciate you always joining me.
I always like being on your show. It's the best, except for
You're
mine.
the
Oh,
best.
no, maybe.
I gotcha. Okay, Randy, let's go. So, what's fun about this table here? This came out again yesterday. The research it shows that how fast is the switch to electric cars? Well, when 23 countries have now reached the 5% tipping point. And this research shows that everything changes once you hit 5%. And we'll show you another table that shows how fast technologies are being adopted, new technologies when they kind of replace the incumbent technology. So here we're looking at the row here is the years after crossing a 5% threshold. So once, you can see the red here, the 1 year after China hit the 5% threshold, they grew, 5%. And then another 10%. So it's kind of a this graph. You can see this kind of growth here of how fast it's growing. Now, the thing that I don't agree with, and I'd like to get your opinion on, is if the U.S. catches this trend, they're saying that 25% of all cars in the U.S. will be electric by 2026. That's still 4 years away from now before you get to 25%, and we're already at 8% now. So I think that this is miscalculating. Let's talk about that. What's your reaction when you saw this, Randy?
Okay, so the biggest thing that you always have to take into consideration on these things is that while the disruption curve is real, and that's what they're trying to show, is that you get the disruption up to 5%, and then the curve takes off. We can see that again in Europe and China. We can see it in California. Over and over and over again, you can see this thing taking place. However, in order for it to happen, you have to have enough vehicles. So you can have this disruption happen, and then if there's not enough product, then the disruption can be capped at a certain level. So in some countries, that's what you're seeing, and you're going to continue to see that kind of a situation until the other car makers are making enough cars and fitting into some of the categories that need to be fit into, like the under 25,000, under 20,000, small pickup trucks, vans, things that aren't available yet. Those need to be available before we can actually get this thing to increase everywhere.
Yeah, I think the way I see it is that it's a mistake for them to say, here's what happened in the last several years for these other countries once they hit 5%. Here's their growth rate. That's not what's going to happen for the next 5 years because the world has changed. There's going to be more cars being built. There's going to be different segments that's being released. There's going to be more superchargers out there. There's more incentives. All of these add on. And so I think that the curve's going to go up much higher. And this is actually the slow part. They think that it's actually huge. It's slow. So let me share a little bit more. So they basically wrote that once 5% of new car sales go fully electric, everything changes. That part is true, right? Anytime that
Yes.
a new technology comes in, that magic number of 5%, like when Netflix came out and they were doing DVD by mail, once they hit 5%, that's when we started seeing Blockbuster having a serious struggle, and they went out of, basically several years later, just a few years later, they went out of business because 5% becomes 15%, and then it takes over. Um, so then this is, this is Sawyer reporting that the newcomers is Canada, Australia, Spain, Thailand, and Hungary, and they joined U.S., China, and most of Western Europe now. So this is happening across the globe. And again, they're still saying 5 to 25% in 4 years, which I think is still slow. Um, what's the
One
reason you
way to
think that is? Yeah, go ahead.
one way to look at the United States is that you have really very different regions. Of course, I've been in marketing my entire life, and that's over I, so there's a lot of years of marketing that I've been out there marketing various products in around the world, but the United States has got a kind of a unique situation where a lot of new products, a lot of new trends, a lot of new designs start on the coasts and then move inward. In the case of the electric car, you not only have the trend starting on the coast, but you've also got a major reason why electric cars were an advantage on the coast, and that was because of the price of gas. It's much lower in the Midwest. And I've been in the bicycle business my whole life. So I've been very, very sensitive. When the price of gas goes way high, people buy way more bikes. Well, so you get the Midwest where you don't have this high price of gas. And so there's a less of an incentive, less of a reason for people to jump into this technology when they have some fun, some fear, uncertainty, a doubt about charging stations, about whether the battery will last long enough, etc. But the rest of the country is going to get it. And especially as the price of the vehicles are now coming down, the Midwest will absolutely catch fire. And if there's enough vehicles, we'll have much faster growth. Again, you can kind of think in terms of the United States is probably going to be at 50% per year. So if we're at 8% now, this time next year it'll be at 12. This time the year after that it'll be 18. Then it'll be 27. Then it'll be 40. I'm saying that the United States actually, if we get enough vehicles, we will be out of the ICE business in 2027.
Okay, well, we'll dive into that a little bit more, explore that further. But the reason why the question is, why is the United States lagging? Well, it shows on numbers of how Norway is at 90%, China's at 30%. Why is U.S. still at 8%? I mean, we're a big country, but so some people are saying it's because of I think this Bloomberg article was explaining that they think it's because most Americans like to. It's a big country. They're in their cars much longer. They want longer range. And then the other thing is that most of the 50% of the cars here are SUVs and pickup trucks. And so that required better batteries. And it's only now that these trucks are coming on the market, especially the Cybertruck is coming. But for me, it's like what they didn't talk about was the incentives. I think incentives is the number one reason, and price parity was critical. And that's why Norway and China is so far ahead in Europe, because they had tremendous incentives, and that's why they took off. Now that the IRA is here, I'm expecting that US is going to, like you said, probably more than what you said, but 50% growth each year. But what's your
Well,
thinking of why the US was low? You said gas
uh,
prices was one.
gas
Yeah,
prices is a big one, but you just brought up another big one. Again, it's availability, and it's not just availability in the gross sense. We only have really one maker in the United States. There's only one
right,
supplier. Well, this supplying any quantities. The rest of the makers, whether they're foreign companies that are making in the United States or whether it's U.S. companies that are making in the United States, have not provided compelling vehicles at a compelling price. If they were providing the compelling vehicles at the compelling price, the United States would be well along on this curve. But now that's beginning to happen. If the Chinese vehicles were able to come into the United States at a normal kind of duty so that they could compete in the under $30,000 range, we would also
right.
be growing faster. But none of the China, BYD is not even bothering to come into the US because of the duties. So, and then you pointed out clearly, if you don't have the pickups and you don't have the vans, and you don't have enough SUVs, well, that's a huge percentage of what's being sold. And then on the other end, you've got the hatchbacks. There's like zero under $25,000 hatchbacks available in the US. You can't get the big growth until that happens.
Yep, okay. So that's a very, very good point. Of course, you in China, they have all these different kinds of electric vehicles, all different segments. That we don't have that in US yet. That's all going to change very soon with
Very
Tesla
soon.
coming out with their compact car, with the revised Model 3, lower price points, prices going down. So let me share some more graphs and tables to share like what's actually happening right now. This is a very recent analysis. It looks like here that it's estimate for 2023 from the International Energy Agency, and they just reported that electric cars are booming. Global sales are going to jump 35% this year to 14 million cars already of the typical 80 million. Again, this is during a recession, during a macro environment. It's doing very well. So the orange is in China. So you can see China's just ballooned very quickly. Look how low they were in 2020. less than 4%, and then they are already at uh, jumped up to 20, what 20 15% here, here on the on this graph here. Then the blue is Europe, right? And then the green is the United States. Very tiny, still very tiny. And this is where, this is what's happened. It's just all very small, but it's going to just go crazy here. So here we're at, yeah, we jumped from last year, 2022 to 23, 35% growth
And
in
as
jumping. I
usual,
think
these
that that's going
folks,
to go.
yeah, and
Yeah,
as usual, these folks are way behind. The
yeah,
new number is 17 million this year, which will be almost a 50% increase.
there you
China
go.
is well above that current
Yeah,
level of 15 or so percent that they're showing there. Europe is a bit ahead of the level they're showing there. So all of this is
yeah,
actually skewed higher, and from a higher platform or higher, 17 million by the end of this year, then even a 50% increase next year would say that the world is going to go to something like, uh, you know, 23, 24 million next year, which would be getting very close to half of what's necessary to go all ice. I mean, to get rid of ice, I'm
okay.
sorry, and the ice
All
age.
right. So here is this is I've got two charts, one for 2021 and one for 2022. Here's the countries and their percentage of sales. So you can see in 2021 already, Norway is at 86%, Iceland, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. And again, we explained that the reason is because of significant both incentives that they did many years ago, as well as penalties for ICE cars. Then you got Germany at 26%. You've got China at 16%. And then you've got the U.S. and Canada at 5% and so forth. So very this is 2021. Here's 2022. You got Norway at 80%, China at 20% already. See at 20%, and you've got the U.S. at 5. And again, I know that this number is now at 8%.
Right.
Maybe in the first quarter of Q3, it's already jumped to 8%. So it's like these numbers are going to go up very, really fast, really quickly.
California in July
Yeah,
did 25% electric vehicles. So that
yeah.
gives you an idea. It's not a U.S. problem; it's a supply problem.
Exactly. Okay, and then if you look at not only battery electric vehicles, but you include the plug-in hybrids, you can see here the percentages in the growth. But these are hockey stick growth up. But you can see that even the plug-ins are also growing. There's people who are still believing that instead of getting the pure electric vehicles, let's go with the plug-ins, um, and that's growing as well too. Boom. Yeah. All right. So what are you thinking? What's your thoughts on the plug-ins and the battery electric vehicles? Randy?
My best guess would be that the plug-in thing is just a dead man walking. It's going to be something that gets phased out very quickly when we get to the point where a full-on plug-in battery electric vehicle is available. A good one is available for under 20,000. Then the the hybrids will be just there won't be any value proposition that'll make sense for them.
Yeah. Okay, so this table here is a very cool table. And what it is it's showing the adoption of new technology and how fast or how long it took to do that. So if you can see that in the 1900s, when a telephone was introduced, I don't know which one is a telephone, which one's electricity. I think telephone is the one right here. It took, decades to 1920 to hit 40%. And it took basically almost 50 years to get up there. Electricity was much faster, of course, from 1910, but still took many years, 10 decades to get up to the 50% mark and higher. But you can see that as the years go on, new technologies go faster and faster, faster. Some of them are straight up the line here, like 1 year, boom. The question some people are asking though is, yes, it's one thing to be talking about cell phones and internet or social media apps. It's just one click and buy, or a small purchase. But what about a car, an electric vehicle? We got the incumbents who's fighting, tooth and nail. Um, it's very expensive to buy this thing. Do you still think that it's going to be this kind of straight up line, or is it going to be more of you know, a longer?
Well, we've already been at this for since the early 2010s. So we've already got more than a decade in this. And it's going to take another. My statement is by 2027, the ice age will be over. There will be literally or virtually almost no ice cars being made in 2027. It'll all be BEV or maybe a few hybrids left over. So yes, the final portion of the curve will be very rapid, but the beginning part of the curve required 20 different companies at least to get in the game and get, because one company can't do it all. As Tesla has proven, they got plenty of money, but you just can't ramp it up that fast. And so you've got 20 companies now that are in the game. You've got maybe 100 companies in China that aren't in the game, but you've got 20 roughly that probably are going to still be around in 2027 making BEV vehicles, and that's enough with the variety that they'll be bringing to market to be able to completely wipe out ICEs.
Well, that's a big statement, Randy. I don't know if I fully can jump on that one. So you're saying by 2027, you think that of the 80 million cars sold, 60, 80 million per year, what percentage are you thinking is going to be
So
ICE
I'm
cars?
saying that in 2027, these existing 20 companies will make about 65 million cars in 2027, and that basically at that point, the other 15 million that might be
Right.
needed, people will just be
Yeah.
waiting. They'll just wait.
Yeah.
Because the next year, those same companies will make 85 million, all right, in say 2028. Maybe it'll take
Yeah.
2029, but they'll make plenty to cover the entire market by 2028, 2029. Won't take till 2030. You can look at each of the curves, and I'll be doing that in a video later this week. I'll be taking all of these companies and showing the curve of the probable manufacturing based on what they've already done, what they've been, how successful they've already been. Some have been, high end Kia has been very successful so far with the products that they've come out with. Mercedes has been pretty successful. Ford has been, they haven't been able to ramp. They've got some nice cars, but haven't been able to ramp. So you have all these different companies. We're going to look at all of the ones that I think are going to still be around, and we're going to show the ramp. And you got, maybe a Tesla at 12 million. You got maybe a BYD at 8 or 9 million by then, by 2027.
Yeah.
Now you get a few at 4, and you get a few more at 3, and a few more at 2, and a few at 1. Doesn't take long to get to 65 million if you got 20 players.
Okay. I guess you're right. It's all about production, right?
Yep.
To the extent that if we can produce 65 million cars, electric vehicles, the likelihood that they'll all be sold versus choosing an ICE car is very high. I agree with that part. And I also know that there's some people so there's a lot of people who disagree. Okay. There's people I've been talking to who think that by 2030, at least 60% will still be ICE cars by 2030.
Yeah.
And then
Not
there's
a chance.
others who say that, like you, that it's going to be this slow ramp and then a precipitous drop of gas cars being sold. And the reason is
Yes.
because just like you're seeing kind of this exponential curve going up of electric vehicles being sold, you're going to see an exponential decline of gas cars.
Well, and you
People
have to
don't.
look at it. You have to look at it pragmatically, and
Yeah.
and I know in the community we talk about that all the time. Folks outside the community just don't understand this. I'm sitting here trying to make a decision about my next car. I can buy a $25,000 car that uses gasoline. I got to
Right.
go to the pump every week. There's closing down gasoline stations. I've got to take it
Yeah.
in every 6 months or so to have it worked on. The amount of money that I'm spending on gasoline is crazy, and it doesn't. And the gasoline car is not that quick. It's not that fast. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. And all of a sudden, I'm looking over here at a 25,000. Same thing. It's 25,000, but I don't have gasoline. I don't have repairs. It's got amazing acceleration, and it's got all the latest doodads and stuff on it. What? How can I not make that? I mean, it's just you have to be, have your head in the ground to make the decision to go with the gasoline car at that point. Now, what happens if it's 5,000 less? What if the gas car is
Yeah.
25,000, but the
Yeah.
equivalent
Yeah.
quality in
Right.
terms of a BEV is 20 or 21 or 22? Game over. So then
It's
people are
game
going to
over.
say,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to get that. I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait a year. I'll wait 2 years. I'll hang on to what I've got. I'll buy a used vehicle. I'll do something until I can get the car I want.
Right. So if by 2027 the prices of electric vehicles are much cheaper, and not even considering the total cost of ownership, and it has all these benefits to it, and the world has moved towards that, you can already see superchargers being built everywhere. Businesses and malls. You're seeing it now more than just trickling at 2-5%. Now you're seeing 15, 20, 30% of the cars out there being sold as this. At some point, yeah, people are just going to choose, no, I mean, why would I buy this thing unless it's priced lower? And they're not. The ICE cars won't be priced lower, so it's not an option. Okay, so this is interesting chart that I like to bring up a few times. And this is like this is one person. This is JPR 007. Took it from the source is General Motors. The source of General Motors is the gray here, which is the number of millions of cars, actuals of ICE cars that's been sold through the years. So 2018, right? You can see that. Then, of course, 2020, there was the COVID, there was a recession. So ICE cars also fell 2022. Okay, that's where we're at now. That's the gray. Now the blue is the actual electric vehicles. So it's very small. You can see this portion, but at some point, as you project it, the dark gray is a projection at this point. This is that JPR 007 projecting that it's going to continue to fall instead of rebounding back up. And this is that belief that at some point, very similar to what you said, which is in their model, by 2027, very few cars will be sold as ICE cars. This matches what you're saying. Now, I think it's a little aggressive, right? But this is what they're saying. The problem is that the electric vehicles, they won't be able to make this many. So in your case, you were saying that by 2027, there'll be 65 million all electric vehicles. In this case, it looks like it's in their projections about 50 million, right? Yeah. And so there's this valley of death.
Here's a way to think about it. Here's a way to think about it. Here's a way to think about the growth of the other companies. Tesla made the statement that they would grow their company 50% a year on average, year after year after year. Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, the rest, they have the manufacturing chops to do that. Okay. They just didn't have the BEV chops to do that. So once they have a good car that they're making 100,000 of, they should be able to make 200,000, more than 50% increase. They should probably be able to make 200,000 of that the next year, and maybe 300,000 the next year, and 500,000, etc. So when these guys have the ability, they have the cash still so far. They've got the manufacturing chops, they've got the facilities. Once they have the basic design down on a compelling car at a compelling price, to make more of them is not going to be the big issue. So to go from, take a Volkswagen, maybe from 400 or 500,000 now to a couple million in 4 years is not a big deal, especially when it's going to be across maybe 10 different models.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so this chart, just to finish it off, is saying that it's a all amount of how many electric vehicles can be made, and unfortunately, it will take some time for these car companies to all be able to make this many. And so there's going to be this, design. Nobody wants to buy, basically what you're saying, the ICE cars. And the demand is going to be higher than they want. So I don't know. This is interesting. This one, it's a little bit of a speculative of what it is, but you are basically right in line with what this graph is showing of what you think is going to happen. Yep.
Yep.
And then, Martin Vieca replied to this. He's the investor relations person for Tesla. He basically said, yeah, this valley of death, what's going to happen when this happens? So he was kind of agreeing with what he was seeing here. So this is one of my most favorite charts that I've had for a while. I bring it up every once in a while. This is this table here. What they did was they took all of the car manufacturers of their projections of how many electric vehicles they're going to make, their ambitions. And you can see that Tesla here is at 20 million, because they made a statement, right, that we expect that by 2030 we'll have 20 million. Well, so did BYD and all the Chinese OEMs and the European manufacturers and the US manufacturers. And what's interesting is if you add up everybody's ambitions of what they think that their forecast of what they'll make by 2030, it adds up to 80 million, which is the average, like the high end of how many cars are sold, new cars are sold each year globally.
Right.
The thing is that people are going, there's no way Tesla's going to sell 20 million because there's all these competitors. But the reality is that even if Tesla makes 20 million, there's nobody's going to be able to make over 80 million. And so it's really Tesla will sell everything that they make. And then on the other hand, what's the likelihood that these other car manufacturers will actually hit their targets? As we know that they're struggling. Toyota's made numbers, they've thrown out numbers, and they don't even ever are nowhere near what they think, and they keep pushing the goalposts even further away. So reality is that the world is their oyster. Whatever they make, they'll sell. If they make more than 20 million, they'll sell it all. So that's what this table. What do you think about this?
Yeah, again, it's kind of the same thing that I've been doing for a while. We actually did it back in the book, the Elon Musk mission. We made estimates back then of what we thought would happen. Even that was back in November when we actually published that book, and we said the same thing that I'm saying now, which is 2027 is the end. And basically, you got to look at some of these companies. I think I would use Hyundai Kia as kind of my gauge. They have been surprisingly, you know, uh, successful in their ramps and in their products, and I'm expecting them to be a leader. I think they might actually end up being the third largest maker after Tesla and BYD. You've got Stellantis, who has been surprisingly effective. You've got Geely, who owns Volvo and who owns MG, which is one of the most popular electric cars in Europe right now. These are companies that nobody's paying attention to. SAIC, who's usually kind of who does a lot of stuff under private label. There's a bunch of companies that are not that chart isn't paying attention to, that are going to be significant. There already are significant players in this business and are going to be very significant by 2027.
Yeah, I mean, it does have the Chinese OEMs there kind of wrapped up together. But you're right. So, Randy, we just spent 30 minutes talking about the current market share for electric vehicles, what we forecast to be, what's going to happen to the ICE cars, the gas cars, and what's going to happen to electric vehicles. But the world is changing one more time. There's going to be autonomy. Unless you think autonomy doesn't roll out to 2030, everything we just said, a little bit out of the window, isn't it? So it's one thing to say, will people buy ICE cars if you've got an electric vehicle that is cheaper, better in many ways? You think by 2027 it won't happen. What if you layer on top of that some manufacturers are able to produce an autonomous car? Would you then buy a car that costs you more, that's an ICE gas car that doesn't do autonomy, or is an electric vehicle but doesn't do autonomy? So how do you forecast this, and how do you think about this? So I guess you have to think about which car company will have an autonomous car, how much can they make of that, how many of those cars can they make, and then when is the competitors going to come up with theirs? And so then those guys, but it certainly won't be 80 million. Could it be? Could this be something that they just retrofit all brand new cars will now have this technology and automatically it'll just all add up?
Yeah,
What's your thinking?
Elon said the other day that basically, if, for instance, if Ford picked up the phone right now and called, I think this was Elon, I could be getting confused, picked up the phone right now and called and said, "We are ready. We're going to put we're going to use Tesla's FSD
That
in
was
Ford
Omar.
vehicles." Then it would
Omar
take
sent out a note.
almost 3 years to design in.
Yeah.
It was Omar. It's going to take
Omar had a
years
tweet,
just to do the design, the analysis, they build it into the overall system because it's.
Yeah. So Omar had a post, and what his post said was that he said that if you gave all of Tesla's software code to Ford today, they'd still take many years. Elon replied to that saying, correct. They would still need to do the cameras, the hardware on the car on the car side and on the server side. And if they just even started today, it will take them 3 years to be able to do that. That's correct.
Right. Yeah. So basically, assuming that Tesla wraps it up here in a few months, they're going to be all by themselves. And yes, it will complicate things. But what complicates it even more, when I'm trying to do my projections all the way to the end of the decade, what complicates it even more is how many of the Tesla fleet goes into their own fleet of robotaxis as opposed to being sold to the public. And what does that do to public decisions with regard to purchasing? I happen to be older than dirt, and I know that if I was confident that I could get a robotaxi to come up for 75 cents a mile, $1 a mile, I'd I'd give up my car right now. I'd be
Oh,
perfectly happy to turn my
thought you were going to say the opposite. Okay.
no, I'd give up the car and let the robotaxi pick me up and turn
Hmm.
my garage into something else. I'm not sure what. And there's a lot of folks that are in my age category. I'm a boomer, and we boomers are a big part of the population. And as much as I enjoy driving, I don't drive very much anymore. And a lot of people are in my boat. They don't drive that much. So why have a car sitting in your garage, 7 days a week, paying for insurance when you're not driving it, paying for my repair thing still comes on. I'm still driving a Volvo. My wife has the Model Y. I said, my repair thing, even though I only drive it like 200 miles a month, that repair thing still comes on every 6 months because it's like, no, you still have to get it. You still have to take it in for oil and stuff every 6 months. So
Yeah.
why would I? No, I'll go with the robotaxi all the way.
Okay. Well, that's really complicates, but very exciting to see what happens if autonomy comes. All of this we just talked about is a lot different conversation. Like you said, maybe we don't need to sell 80 million cars a year anymore. Uh, right? Many people switch to ride hail services. Not everybody, but yeah, a big chart. And then the
The
question is, can they
teenager,
retrofit? Yeah.
yeah, the teenagers and the young adults are already doing that with
Hmm.
Lyft and Uber. So imagine how much more interested they'll be in doing it when there's no driver, and especially and
Hmm.
especially if it's less expensive. Uh, it's very very likely that we'll be seeing a generation that will never get their driver's license.
I think so too, for sure. Okay, fun conversation. Thank you so much, Randy. That was great. Thank you. Appreciate you.
You got it.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much. Let's get brighter.